Lando Norris has lost it all in the 2024 Brazilian Grand Prix. His opponent winning had more to do with luck rather than talent. And this is what keeps the headlines and social media busy at the moment. What did Lando Norris mean by what he said? I'm Wimbo. Here's 3 seconds to leave a like. The race at Interlagos, Sao Paulo, Brazil was one to remember. Due to the wet weather, the race was impossible to predict. What was clear was that in the title battle between Lando Norris and defending champion Max Verstappen, the Englishman was in a great position to deal a huge blow to his Dutch friend. Max Verstappen got caught out during qualifying by a red flag, which was called after many other drivers could set a time, but he couldn't. Apparently the Aston Martin that crashed was reversing, and there may have been a possibility that the car would make it to the pits, and then a normal yellow flag would have been waved. That was the explanation given by the people that don't believe in the anti-Max conspiracies. But we know better, don't we? Now, this was already controversial, as there were 4 red flags during qualifying, and they were all called within a few seconds. But this one was called after about 40 seconds. I was watching this unfold in a bungalow in the middle of the Netherlands, and I nearly smashed the TV, so much for a relaxing weekend. To make matters worse, Verstappen and his team had also decided to take a new ICE component to give him a little bit more speed. The penalty for taking that engine was 5 places, so he had to start from P17. So Max Verstappen was starting in P17 and his title rival was flying during qualifying and put his car on P1 with quite some margin. Norris did a hell of a job, and me as a Max fan, I was shitting myself. Well, I was really worried. I did a worst case scenario where Max Verstappen scored no points and Norris scored the win plus the point for the fastest lap. That would have put Norris 18 points away from Max Verstappen with 3 races to go and a sprint race. However, the first little benefit Verstappen had was Albon not being able to start the race due to the massive shunt he had in Q3. So effectively, Verstappen had 15 drivers in front of him that he needed to beat. Then another crash went his way. Lance Stroll, the happy chap from Canada, crashed during the warm-up lap. It was the same Lance Stroll who caused a red flag that screwed Verstappen during quali. Then he made the genius decision to try and get his car on track again by driving over the deep, wet, muddy gravel. And guess what? His car got stuck. So there was a delayed start call sent to all the cars, and Lando Norris thought he had to do another lap. A lot of younger drivers followed him, but a lot of smart, more experienced drivers didn't, like Esteban Ocon and Max Verstappen. They eventually received a signal to do another lap, but Norris and a bunch of other drivers were noted to be investigated after the race. To me, it just showed how sharp Verstappen was at that moment and how distracted Norris was. These protocols aren't that hard to follow, according to the F1 TV presenters. In the meantime, the track was wet, but it wasn't raining. There was more rain on the way, and that rain was exactly when the race finally started. Lando Norris did what he's been doing most of the season at the start, and that is losing a position. This time it was to his compatriot George Russell. In the back there was Maximilian Verstappen, who had a brilliant first lap. A lap which is compared to the lap of the gods of Ayrton Senna in Donington. It's funny to me that I made a video last week about Verstappen needing to embrace his inner Prost rather than his inner Senna, and then he does this. It aged like milk, like most of my videos. Lol. So that was 7 positions gained in 1 lap. Verstappen was in P10 when he started overtaking drivers in front one by one. Some took more effort than others, and especially the overtake on McLaren's second driver Piastri was brilliant. Just a pass in turn 1 with complete confidence that the grip was there. Magic. Before we knew it, Verstappen was in P6 behind a group of slower drivers. Leclerc made it very hard for Max to pass him, and it looked like he was going to be stuck there for a while. Fortunately, Leclerc didn't trust his aging Inters anymore and opted to pit to undercut the Alpine of Esteban Ocon. This put him in slower traffic, so we can write this down as Ferrari strategy, I think. Around that time, Norris also started asking to get fresh tires. He must have felt the grip getting less, and it made him worried. Max Verstappen, who didn't make it to Q3 the day before, had fresh Inters where the others in front only had used intermediate rain tires. It's a difference of 4 or 5 laps, I'd say. The McLaren pit wall decided against pitting because they saw what the traffic did to Leclerc's pace. Then Hülkenberg stopped on track. which brought out a virtual safety car. The Haas car was helped on its way again, and then was black flagged as receiving help from a third party is forbidden. Just when the VSC was ending, Norris and Russell went into the pits. The advantage of the slower speed was gone then, so it was not the best call. This put Esteban Ocon in the lead, with Max Verstappen behind him. Lando Norris did a spectacular overtake on Russell on the long straight. I think it looks awesome. Those cars with that speed and all that spray, beautiful. As the radar had already predicted, the rain got heavier and heavier until the FIA saw no other option than to send out Bert Mainlander to lead the car safely through the storm. And then poor young Latin hero Franco Colapinto crashed. The Argentinians, who usually hate the Brazilians, embraced him and are wildly supportive of him. Really nice to see. Anyway, this crash caused a red flag, and this is what angered Lando Norris so much. He immediately came over the radio and talked about the free pit stop the people that stayed out got. So the race restarted with a rolling start, which Ocon did perfectly and stayed ahead of Max. The driver who needed to do well to win and keep hope for the title didn't do so well. Lando Norris went off track and lost the place. This stayed the same for a while until Carlos Sainz crashed because he drove over a white line. So another safety car. And another restart. This restart was great for Verstappen, who chucked it down the inside of turn 1 again without any fear and saw himself in the lead of a race he started in P17. His title rival made more mistakes and went off track, coming back on the track behind his teammate Oscar Piastri, who was told to give up his position again just like he did a day before. He gave up a sprint win to help Lando in his fight against Max. That was the race pretty much done. Max Verstappen in free air set about 15 fastest laps, and down the order not much happened. He extended his lead on Norris with 18 points to 62 points with only 3 weekends left. Red Bull, the media and lots of fans were mesmerized by this overpowering drive from the 27-year-old man from the Netherlands. Everyone except one. Lando Norris said after the race that he made a few small mistakes, but he was mainly very unlucky with the red flag. He said it shouldn't have been a red flag, and he said being able to change tires under a red flag is lucky, it doesn't require any talent. Now you could think that this is just a grumpy guy who lost 18 points and the championship, so he's not being careful with his words. That he just didn't express himself very well, right? But then I saw he said the same thing to Rachel Brooks at Sky, and the same thing again at Viaplay. So it wasn't a spare of the moment thing. He genuinely believes that Verstappen, Ocon and Gasly were lucky. Well, I disagree. There are a few things at play here. We all know the wet tires are shit. You can use them for more grip, but you're much slower. Teams keep an eye on the radar all the time, telling the drivers in detail how many laps Class 2 rain will last before it becomes Class 1 rain or whatever. So in my humble opinion, they could have known things were about to happen because many drivers hadn't pitted yet. Norris was asking for new tires a lot earlier than he actually got them. So it could have been worse. What I'm trying to say is that those people who stayed out had that courage and had the skill to stay on track. So to say that getting your tires changed during a red flag isn't talent is just not true. I understand that it's frustrating that it's allowed, but it's for safety reasons. If a session becomes too dangerous, they need to restart. And to restart, you need to be able to do so in the least dangerous way. Now, there is something to say for a red flag with new tires and a red flag without new tires, depending on the situation. However, this will lead to more discussions. People will point at that one race where it was allowed, and now it's not. Lando Norris was beaten, and it showed in his comments. He also said that George Russell deserved to win the race most. I don't know what the reason was for him to say that, but sure, whatever. The stand Norris has on red flags isn't new. I came across an old video of him talking about it in 2021, and he said the exact same thing. So he is consistent about it. I just don't understand how you can complain about another driver being lucky when you had a pole yourself with only an Alpine, one Mercedes and one Ferrari around you at the start, and 2 drivers of the Red Bull sister team. His main rival was unfortunate due to a red flag earlier that day. So I get his point, I understand the frustration, but after a race where everyone is excited about how Max Verstappen performed, you can't come across the way he did. This attitude is why people don't like him. I remember Norris saying Vettel should stick to racing, Hamilton had a fast car 7 years ago, and now it looked like he said Verstappen was lucky in a race where he went from P17 to the win. At the moment, there's a bunch of memes flying around with Norris at the butt of the joke. Unfortunately, my social media is flooded again with dramatic posts about the hate Norris is receiving and that it's the worst thing ever. I honestly feel for those young folks, because someday Lando Norris might be in a real title fight. One where the pressure is on, like it was between Verstappen and Hamilton in 2021. These kids won't survive if a bunch of slander names and memes upset them this much. Maybe it's for the best if Lando Norris doesn't get involved in the title battle next season. Let Leclerc and Verstappen fight it out, with Piastri as third, who runs away with the prize. Subscribe. Take care now. Doei doei.